Hey everyone, welcome back to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast with your host Russell Martin and Brent Aiken. Listen, we're glad you are taking time to sit down and listen to this conversation today, and we hope that you find it helpful and insightful and encouraging as you continue to pour into your students. Before we get started, I want to remind you about social media. Check us out at Talk Student Men, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Also visit our website, studentministryconversations.org, for more show notes and articles and other helpful information as well. We are always glad to bring you great conversations with great leaders that may inspire you and teach you something new. And so today's conversation is no different. So Brent, you had this interview. Can you tell us a little bit about what we're going to hear?
Yeah, so today you're going to hear a conversation that I had with Hunter Smith. He's a youth pastor in Huntsville, Alabama, and he joins the conversation. And we talk about, like you said, speaking to large groups, but specifically we talk about how to speak at camps and retreats. We talk about the ins and outs, the do's, the don'ts. We talk about how to prepare to speak. And then we also flip the script and we talk about what you need to know as a youth pastor in order to hire the right guy for your next speaking engagement. It's a great conversation and I can't wait to hear what you guys think about it.
Well, in that case, there's no use waiting any longer. Here's Brent's conversation with Hunter Smith.
All right. Hey, guys. Welcome back to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Brent Aiken. And today we are sitting down with Hunter Smith. Hunter Smith has been a youth pastor for a little while now. And without me sharing all the nitty gritty details of who he is, Hunter, tell us a little bit about you, where you are, how long you've been at your church, what you like to do, etc.
Yeah, so I've been in student ministry about in either volunteer, bivocational, full-time, part-time capacity for about 10 years now. I've been in church staffs in Kentucky, went to New Orleans for seminary, was on a church staff down there in Louisiana, was in North Mississippi, and we just recently made a transition to North Alabama in January 2020, which about 2 months before ministry, as we know, it changed forever. So what a great time to start. But my wife and I serve at Mount Zion Baptist Church in Huntsville, Alabama. I'm the junior high student pastor there. Love what I do. Love working with 7th and 8th graders. Love partnering with children's ministry to bring up students and get to know them, get to minister to their families, get to equip the church to minister to these students as well. So love what I do. I've often said my goal in life is to be like 80 years old with the walker with the tennis balls on the end of it, like getting off the bus, taking kids to camp, is my dream. Love students. And part of that is just because as a teenager, my life was really impacted by student ministers who poured into me, took care of me, discipled me, and really want to be able to have that same impact on this generation of students. Spare time, my wife and I are expecting our first baby end of April, beginning of May. So many sleepless nights in thinking about that oncoming transition in life. But we're excited and looking forward to that. Big sports fan, being here in Alabama, so cheering on the Crimson Tide every chance we get, and just trying to make Christ known amongst this generation more than anything. So I appreciate asking the question.
Man, yeah, that's awesome. Congrats on the addition of y'all's first kid coming soon. That's great. You're talking about those sleepless nights now, man, for any youth pastor or ministry leader / parent listening to now, what's rolling in their heads is like, oh yeah, you think you have sleepless nights now. But it's a great thing, man. Congrats on that. I think it's ironic that you brought up the, like, you want to be 80 years old with the rocker and everything. I like walking in and taking kids to camp, because the last episode that I recorded was this past week. and it was Jerry Varner, and we talked about longevity in student ministry and like how to do that for the long term, and have that it's not a stepping stool. It's not like do this until you get your own church or anything like that. But like we need more youth pastors that are like in it for the duration of their career. And man, you just said that you're doing that. So that's awesome. But specifically, you brought up the January 2020, and I thought this was an interesting transition into our topic for today, because you're talking about something that you probably haven't been able to do much of as of the last 2 years. And we are sitting down today to talk about talking to groups, or talking at like camps or retreats and stuff like that. And so I got to say, with COVID and everything else going on, we really haven't had too much of an opportunity for that to happen as of late. So why should student pastors, and I guess I'll kind of make this twofold, why should student pastors work on their communication skills towards this goal? And why should we do it now even more than ever?
I think the first thing that we need to do before we start, thinking ahead about, hey, being on stage at camps, conferences, things like that is, ultimately like where we're planted is the harvest that we're responsible for. And so, I mean, first thing, like day in and day out, like where we're at on your Wednesday night, on your Sunday morning, however that looks like, man, that we're taking that just as seriously as we would, oh man, I made it big time. I get to speak at camp, I try and tell people first off and foremost, like, man, my students come first. Man, if you want me to come and speak to a group, or you want me to come speak for your camp and everything, that's awesome. But know that you're my secondary. Like, I still care about you. I still care about your students. I still care about your ministry and everything like that. But man, like starters, where we're planted is what we're ultimately going to be responsible for more than anything. And so, working on those communication skills, practicing those, perfecting those. And I think if that's your goal, I think it just makes you a better communicator on a week in, week out basis for your students and for your teenagers and for your church as a whole, is just building up what you have in front of you. And I think you look at the life of Jesus, like, take the content aside for just a second. Now, like, his content was amazing. I mean, it was the gospel of Jesus Christ. There's power in it. The Bible says that it goes out, it doesn't come back void. But man, you couple that with just his teaching strategies and the way that he could captivate an audience, and the way that he used, like, I think in Matthew, when he's talking to Peter and he's talking to the disciples in Caesarea Philippi, and I think that's right. And he said, man, look at all these rocks, Peter, you're going to be just like this rock. That man, he's using all these things at his fingertips, all these things at his disposal to be just a great communicator. And I think, like in Philippians, that Paul writes, he says, man, like, let your reasonableness be known. I think like that comes in with our content, but I think that also really can be applied to how we convey that message as well. That, man, like if we're speaking truth, but we're speaking it in a confusing and kind of muddled down version, and something really hard to grasp and understand, especially for students, I don't think we're being as effective as we possibly can be with the gospel. But man, if you can take the message of life and the message of truth, combine that with being able to clearly articulate the hope that we have in Jesus, I mean, I think the ministry that you are a part of is going to be great. I think that goes for your local congregation. I think that goes for if you have opportunities to speak somewhere else. And so ultimately, like, man, being able to practice, being able to just bounce things off of. One of the best things that I have is, my wife, just to be able to bounce illustrations and ideas off of. And there's times that she says, hey, that's really great. There's times that she says, that makes no sense at all, and you look like an idiot. And I love her for that. And that helps ultimately, if we can clearly communicate the gospel. And I think that's the biggest compliment that can be said about our ministry and about our speaking, is if the gospel is clear and if the gospel can be understood. I think if that happens, man, that we'll see great things happen.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think great points. And you started kind of touching on this, and we'll kind of touch on it throughout the entire duration of this podcast. But you said that there are conversation or communication skill sets. If you had to name like a couple different things that are like necessary towards having great communication skills, like if you could narrow it down to a couple that are like super, super important, what would you say like you have to have in order to be a great communicator?
I think more than anything, we just have to have a firm grasp of our content. I think we could everybody who's been at school, we can attest to the fact that at some point in time, we've probably had to stand up in front of a group of people and give a presentation over a book that we didn't read, over a chapter that we are ill prepared for. And, the concept of B's and C's get degrees works really great in academia. I don't necessarily think it's great, spirituality. And so I think like if we have a great grasp of our content of the gospel, if we are preaching that to ourselves consistently and regularly, I think that's going to come out in the way in which we talk, in the way in which we speak. And I'm not saying that everybody has to be like super extroverted, that everybody has to tell like 18 million funny stories. And if the kids are laughing, then they're happy and everything's great. If the kids are crying, then they're going to get sad. None of that stuff. I think if we have just great grasp of our content, I think that's going to affect how we just explain it. I think it's going to affect how we're able to relate it, how we're able to say like, okay, we're able to bring these illustrations. We're able to bring like, hey, has anybody ever had this time of fill in the blank? That if we grasp and we understand it for ourselves personally, and if we're practicing saying that to ourselves over and over, that we're able to convey it clearly to everybody else.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. And I think that's important. You have to know the content that you're delivering a message on. But then on top of that, like just like you said, we've all done the book study. We've all done the chapter report where we didn't read it and we're like, oh, well, they went to that one place and they flew the ship or whatever. I mean, and it's obvious when someone doesn't prepare that you can tell that they didn't prepare. And so preparation is huge. But a lot of times, even going from like a Wednesday night or a Sunday night message style to where you're talking in front of a group of 10 or 15 kids to a group of 30, 40, 50 plus at a retreat or a camp or anything like that. What would you recommend pastors that are wanting to get their feet wet as far as speaking towards bigger groups? Because I would say, even though like knowing your content is key, and even though like there are specific things that like you need to focus and prioritize the group that you have, I would argue that like there's a big difference between talking to a group of 15 of your own students to even 40 of students that might not all be yours, because the nerves are at an all-time high and other things like that. So for this pastors that might have this coming up on their horizon for the first time, or they might just think that they're not quite as good as they should be, what would be some things to like work on to get their feet wet when speaking to groups?
I think one of the first things to do is make the most of opportunities. There's times that, we're going to get asked to maybe come and, hey, will you lead 6 a.m. senior adult Bible study sometime? Like if you're on church staff, there's going to be all these different times you're going to be asked for things. And I think like being able to speak to different audiences frequently or with some sort of frequency, I think it will help round out your kind of overall speaking abilities, your overall teaching abilities and things like that. Because, if you're able to, relate to different audiences, that's going to work out. And I think the more practice you have in that, even if like, all right, I've practiced of nothing but like 10 of my own students over and over and over. Well, now, I'm being asked to lead like Sunday night Bible study or, Sunday morning, quote unquote, big church or stuff like that. Taking the most of those opportunities, because I know for me personally as a teacher and as a speaker and things like that, where I have grown the most is simply through exposure and simply through practice. It's the same concept is true for anything. You're only going to get to Carnegie Hall through practice, kind of thing like that. And so making the most of those opportunities. And I think one of the things about it's really, there's like a really sticky moment here of, all right, accepting opportunities that are given and then seeking out opportunities. Because at the end of the day, like, you don't want to be known as somebody who's just like peddling yourself on like, hey, let me come and speak to you. Hey, let me. And I always feel really like apprehensive. And I don't sit here and just like email people left and right and be like, hey, let me come talk to your group, or let me come do your camp, or things like that. Some of those have happened naturally through networking. Some of those have just happened through like just sheer happenstance. And I think part of it is, if you're practicing and you're ready to, be ready for those opportunities, and your practice to speak to large groups, speak to different, like different kinds of groups or things like that. When those opportunities come just by sheer happenstance, you're going to be more ready for that. And I said, like, what I've always tried to differentiate is there's a difference in self-seeking, like, hey, let me come speak to your students. And there's a difference in giving ministry of saying, hey, I'd really love to come serve your ministry. And say that in genuine of heart, not saying like, there's that tendency that all of us have that we want the stage, we want the spotlight. If we're honest, like we really love those moments. But ultimately, okay, am I using that to, quote unquote, further my brand, or I'm using that to serve ministries, to serve friends in the gospel ministry, to serve students, to lead people, to be obedient to my ministry and things like that. And so that's kind of the line that I try that I'm always like, I think you always have to teeter on. Is like, okay, is this for me, or is this for because I love students and I want to see them come to know the Lord, kind of thing.
Oh, yeah, that makes total sense. And then I think the other thing to kind of throw on the back end of that, with you being an Alabama fan, we'll just jump into a football reference. But it's you all. I'm sure most people have heard the backup quarterback that comes in and wins the game. It's not because he was there that day. It's because of the 1,000 reps of all the plays that he did unnoticed on a field by himself, practicing, making himself better. So when the moment came, he was ready. He was able to do it. And he was there to support the people that he was there to support. And so, that is ultimately the goal of like any backup position in anything. It's like you're not necessarily there to make a name for yourself. You're there to make the team shine. And so when the star goes down, or whoever, or when you have an opportunity to step up, it's that opportunity, that availability that you have, the practice that you've put in, that allows you to step up and give yourself and serve your team, or serve your church, serve your students, however you want to put it, and really gives an opportunity for you to do not only do your best, but also present yourself in a way that hopefully comes out humble. Because I personally have used a lot of different speakers. I've directed camps. I've done a lot of different things as far as like group speaking, stuff like that. And most of it's been on the other end where I'm hiring speakers. And I can definitely tell the difference between a speaker that wants to be there and a speaker that wants to get paid. And it's a terrible analogy, but like there's a huge difference, and you can spot it immediately because the ones that want to be there are there. And that sounds really plain and dry, but when in all reality, like the ones that want to be there are there. They're engaged with the students when they're not speaking just as much as when they are. And they are invested in their time at that place. So whether it's a retreat, whether it's a church camp, whether it's just like a D now or whatever, like the ones that are really there to be there are the ones that are investing in the kids the entire time they're there. I've seen so many bands and speakers that like, yeah, it's great. They're awesome when they come out on stage, but like you won't see them again until they come back on stage again. And I have always had a difficulty, like wanting to bring them back because they're not there. They're there for the paycheck, or they're there for the sake of like doing the job that they were told to do. But you can tell passion and you can tell occupation, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah.
So, but you as an individual, you said you've done this process multiple times. So you've spoke at different groups, whether it be by invitation or request or other things. Walk me through your process. How do you prepare when you know that you have like a multi-lesson camp coming up, or maybe a retreat coming up that you're speaking at? Like, what is your process of like working to not only develop the message, but then also make sure that you're like honed in on the actual act of speaking?
Yeah. So can I touch on what you just said for just a second? Just like, I mean,
sure. Yeah.
I mean, what you said was awesome. Cause like, yeah, I said at the end of the day, like probably my job number one, is quote unquote job is, ministering to my students. And so I'm in both ends of, booking speakers, booking bands and everybody like that. And I said like that what I expect out of others is the same thing that I want to put forth with if I'm asked to come somewhere. And so like, I want the content to be good. I want relationships to happen. I think we earn the right to say, and that goes for even our Wednesday night. We earn the right to say on stage what we develop in relationship off of it. And being able to hang out with little Johnny and little Susie and things like that are really, really awesome. And at the same time, like there's a real danger in doing the whole, like, let's bring a speaker, let's bring a band in, because there's a lot of trust that is being shown right there, because it is very easy that this guy can come in, this guy, this girl, this band, whatever, can come in and just set fires left and right to your ministry and to your church. And they're gone in 2 days. And I'm the one that's left trying to put fires out, and really I'm the one left on the line. And so part of it is just making sure that we are being responsible with our flock and being responsible for the people we bring in, and having trust. And for, if you're asked to speak at camp or something like that, man, acknowledging the fact that this truly is a tremendous honor, and they're showing tremendous trust in asking, me, or asking, this band or whoever to come and speak the gospel truth to these students. And I think that weight of responsibility carries over to, how we interact off the stage with the students. That carries over to, all right, they're going to follow you on Instagram and all those things after the event, making sure that what I said on stage that week of camp when they were in 8th grade, that content stays true and stays valid when they're, in college and still following you on Instagram and things like that. So that was good. And I forgot your question.
You're good. I kind of have something to throw on the end of that as well.
Sure.
And this just goes into, we're all youth pastors. We've all, or either we're volunteering or we're paid staff or part-time, full-time, whatever. I would say the majority of youth pastors that I've come in contact with are in youth ministry due to the relationship that they developed with their youth pastor growing up. And one of the things that I love to say a lot is like, I can probably, I had the same youth pastor from my 7th grade year to my sophomore year. And he's still one of my best friends. But I can honestly remember maybe 3-4 lessons today that he taught. And it's not necessarily what he taught that built the relationship and built the life change in me. It's how he presented himself, how he was relational, how he showed up, how he was adamant to be a part of our lives. And that's ultimately like when you're speaking to a group, like that's what I want to see when I hire you. I want you to be like, if it's a church camp, I want you to be on the slip and slide with the kids. I want to see you playing gaga ball. I want to see you pulling away from the counselors and go sit at like a table full of kids in the dining hall. Just for the sake of like, yeah, I totally understand that you need preparation time and everything. But like when I, especially if I pay you like to come be a speaker or be the band, like I want you to be present over the whole thing. And it's really, really cool because those are the ones that make an impact. Those are the ones that are not only are they there, but they're the ones that like have the kids that follow them on Instagram forever. It's not because they had this stunning point 2 in their Wednesday night sermon or anything like that. I mean, sure, there's going to be some kids that remember the points and remember the messages, but in all reality, the large majority of the group is going to remember your relationship. They're going to remember how you presented yourself towards them, towards everybody else at camp, and how you lived out yourself for that week. And it's super, super impactful. So I would just continue and kind of go on to what you said. But the question that I asked before we kind of tangented and came back is just basically walk me through your process of how you prepare for either a multi-lesson camp or a retreat. A lot of camps most of the time are like 4 to 5 nights. And so that means you're looking at 4 to 5 lessons at least. And that's not to mention if you're also responsible for like maybe putting together small group curriculum or anything like that. So how do you prepare knowing that you have like a bunch of lessons to tie in and collectively pull together? And then also, how do you prep yourself for the actual speaking engagement? Is there any practice or ritual that you do like before you go on stage? Like just walk through the whole thing.
Yeah. So sometimes they're really great. So this will be my second summer coming up working with Lifeway and preaching for Century Kid camps. And they're really awesome. They give basically like, hey, here's your messages, and here's, like the main points we need you to hit, and take it, kind of make it your own. But, and that's, man, is really awesome when somebody comes to you and says, hey, like, here's kind of our theme. Here's what we really want, like night 1, night 2, even deeper. If they come in to be like, hey, we really would love for you to preach on this passage night 1, this passage night 2, because like there's a freedom that comes along with like, hey, what would you like me to preach on? Well, the Bible. Yeah. Like preach from the Bible. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. And there's a moon in the sky, like, that type thing. That there's a lot of freedom there, but also like, man, there's so much great stuff. And what we try and do with our ministry as well, especially if we're bringing somebody in, is they're really able to create, and we're really able to like kind of contour the content and the theme and everything to really meet our teenagers and meet our students where they are. And in those moments, man, those things are really awesome because you're really able to be used and do really great work and really great things for the kingdom, because you're able to really touch on what's going on in this particular time. So I said, like, if they give you plenty of time in advance, you get it and you're able to work on it and you're able to kind of chip away at it time and time again. And so a lot of times, like this past summer, I spoke for our own camp. We, for like our students, we're late and kind of this venue opened up all of a sudden. So the senior high pastor and myself, we kind of like split and did double duty. And so we had, about a month to craft like 4 messages each for that week. And I said, just kind of like taking it off, like nibble at a time, and kind of like, all right, this week I'm going to write sermon 1, and I'm going to write like, just to make it real, easy, like 3 points in a poem kind of thing. I'm going to do intro point 1 on Monday afternoon. I will do second point Tuesday. Wednesday, I'm kind of busy with Wednesday night because that's kind of our traditional teaching time. Thursday, I'm going to hit point 3. And then towards the end of the week, we'll put it all together, see if it makes sense, and kind of roll with it. And if you're able to kind of like piece it off like little by little, one, if you're able to get it done early, that gives you that much time for preparation and committing to memory, which gives you that much time, like you said, on a slip and slide, in rec and things like that. Sometimes if there's not a theme or there's not something, they're like, hey, like we just roll with it. This is something that I've learned is kind of being able to double dip a little bit. And so, if you're having to do a series on evangelism, let's say, for your Wednesday night, and it's a 4 or 5 week series, man, take a lot. You've put time, you've put effort, you've put blood, sweat, and tears in that. Take that, build upon it, make it your own, and make it, bring it and say, hey, how does this work? I'm kind of in the habit of like our Wednesday night, kind of structure is like I teach and then we do small groups. So I'm in the habit of creating small group questions and trying to make good small group questions that begin discussion. So as far as like if I'm having to create small group curriculum, I'm kind of in that habit of creating questions as we go. And a lot of those questions, there's an art to writing good questions that we can talk about some other time. It's not, how does this make you feel? Well, that's not really starting a great conversation, but I said, doing all that as far as like the preparation too, I like to take, I said, your preparation, committing to memory, things like that you do beforehand. One of the things that I like to do is if I'm doing a Sunday morning, if I'm doing a big thing, is just like read through my message or like rehearse my message and record it. And that way, when I'm on my commute home, when I'm on my commute to the office, when I'm walking or when I'm on a jog or something like that in the gym, I'm able to just kind of rehearse over and over and over with those things. And as always, like nothing ever goes like according to plan when you're on stage. There's always some time that the spirit moves and something great happens and you're able to see just God at work in those things. But that's kind of my like Spark Notes. No, I don't feel like it was very Spark Notey, but that's kind of my like mental processes in that.
No, I think that's good. And I think another thing to understand with the whole like speaking to groups or speaking in larger settings is there's not necessarily a right and a wrong way to prepare, to do it. We all have different practices and methods. And the whole point of bringing this conversation to light is just to present an idea. And that's like everybody will prep different. And maybe you haven't found your way of prepping, or maybe you have one and you're like, in all honesty, this is not the best way. I could probably find a far better, more effective way that really plays to the strengths I have as a person. And everybody has different ones. Me personally, when I have to prep for something like that, I actually don't. I spend a lot of time thinking about it. And it'll be in my head all the time, but I will literally keep my phone next to me and I have the notes app on my phone. And anytime something pops up into my head that I've been like kind of thinking through, I'll just kind of type in brief outline points and marks, and I'll just kind of work and kind of push them all together. And then after I've had a while to think on it, I will kind of put it all on paper and be like, all right, so this fits here. Yeah. Okay. We can go here. This kind of makes a smooth transition here, and we'll just develop off of that. But my mentality and my focus is just throw it at the wall and see what sticks. And so anything and everything that I can think of and how, that would be on theme or on topic for whatever this speaking engagement is, you throw it up there, see if it sticks, leave it a while, pray about it. And then whatever does stick, just kind of line out and build your stuff from there. So, but like I said, everybody has different ways. My way is not better than Hunter's. Hunter's is not better than mine. It's just how you as a person operates and functions. And so find your niche, find your availability and your strengths as far as public speaking and engaging a crowd, and then go from there. And so we've kind of talked about the need for communication skills. We've talked about getting your feet wet in speaking to groups. We kind of walked through the process as far as like how you develop your messages and everything like that. Is there anything else content related as far as speaking engagements that you haven't touched on that you would want to bring to the table?
I think like overall, especially in these things like camps, retreats, DNOws, things like that, you're always going to be, wanting to present the gospel. And I said, like, this is where especially rehearsing that element comes into play. I think is so important because I think we could all sit here and probably say about a speaker or somebody that we know who like could, whether intentional or not, come across really manipulative. And truthfully, I mean, let's be honest. If we really wanted to, we could create a mood, and this goes for a Wednesday night or Sunday morning. We could create a mood. We could get the music just right. We could say the right things, and we could get, quote unquote, everybody there saved. But is that really the responsible thing to do? I don't necessarily think that, manipulating and either trying to guilt somebody into salvation or trying to make somebody who has made a profession in Christ to doubt that even for a minute, I think is one of the things that I don't think is the most responsible thing we can do. And so just being able, like I said, to be able to clearly articulate, this is the gospel. This is what it means to follow Christ. We are sinners. Christ died for us. He paid our price. We can be made new. We can be new creation, all those things. But being able to really adequately rehearse that, properly rehearse that, and say it in such a way where it makes sense. And it like I said, one of the best compliments that could be paid for a communicator of the gospel is that, hey, it was clear. And I think that, ultimately, especially in a situation like that, because like I said, like we've all been in situations, we've all been at camps and things like that, where the guy on stage is saying the exact same thing that we have been preaching to our students 51 weeks out of the year. But they're on stage, there's lights, there's things like that now all of a sudden, it takes all of a sudden now it clicks, But I think also the other thing is like, it comes back to that whole, like, are you there for your glory or are you there to serve ministries? If you're there to serve ministries, man, don't sit here and say, I want to pray with you at the altar. Man, tell them to go to their leaders. As a student pastor myself, man, that means the world to me that this person that I am pouring into, that I get to walk them through these questions, that I get to walk them through these things. And I think the leaders that you're partnering with in ministry will appreciate that. But also, I think the decisions that the students make, it will have more tendency to stick because it's with somebody that they're going to have to go home with, that they're going to have to see, that is going to continue to care and invest in them. I think that's just a great practice to develop as well.
Man, I love that you said that. Me being like, that's one of my biggest pet peeves in ministries when we go to the big event or the big conference or the big whatever. And they're like, oh, everybody come up to the front. And like all of my kids flock up there. And then I ask them later and I'm like, hey, so what'd you talk to that guy about? Oh, nothing. Well, I mean, like you obviously felt something, like you felt compelled to get up there. Like you're never like what, like, so we can kind of continue to work on this. Like what is going on? Like, I want to know. Oh, I mean, we just had a conversation and like, it's like the moment for life change stops there because that communication door is closed. And so being the person that does push back towards the youth ministry or the youth groups, like that is, I don't mind if I am not the person that finally hammers in the point, but like when you turn it around and you say, hey, if you're stirred tonight, if this impacted you in any way, go find your youth pastor or go find your counselor, go find whatever. Like if you're at a camp setting, maybe you obviously aren't at all the camps that your kids go to if like they're at the same time, or maybe your kids aren't in your small group for that week or something to that nature. They still have the opportunity to go to the person that it's going to be the most meaningful at the time to tell. And I think that's something that a lot of larger events miss. And that's really, really kind of stopping a lot of great conversations from happening. And so that would be a really, really good point. And I'm super, super glad that you brought that up because that is a huge one. Like if you're there to serve ministries, your goal is to ultimately point them back for the questions to be answered by those ministries. Like it's great for you to answer questions, but then you say, hey, I don't know. Hey, why don't you go talk to your youth pastor, or let's go talk to your youth pastor. you can still be in that conversation, but you have the availability to kind of draw them with you and say, hey, so this is your kid. They were asking about this. I was wondering if you wanted to have this conversation with us. It just ultimately works out to have better long-term communication between the two parties at hand. And then ultimately, like you said, the goal is to serve the students and to serve the leaders that are there with their students. And I think, man, you hit that out of the park. That was such a great thing to pull out in this conversation. Outside of this conversation, though, where can they go to get help? Do you have any resources or maybe a book that you've read that really kind of worked on helping you prepare for messages or anything like that? Where would you point people?
So I think one of the great things that I love just listening to podcasts of preachers and speakers that I've been able to know, that I'm able to hear, like, all right, this is how you work humor into a message. This is how, like, and if you follow along with those things long enough, like, especially like Sunday morning, not all the times do things on Sunday morning always go according to plan, but just being able to, listen and watch and observe and, just note off of other speakers and other people like that. I'm blanking on a lot of books that I've read in the past in regards to speaking and things like I said, like I never, a lot of just the way that I speak and a lot of things that, like, teaching in groups and things are just things that I've learned over time, or just things, like I said, just through practice that I've learned, like, hey, this works, this, never do this again, kind of things like that. And I said, like, the majority of, like, how we get great at things and how we get good at things quite honestly, is just through practice. And like I said, some of that is just going to be through taking the most of opportunities. If, you have like I said, if you have an opportunity to do big church, do big church, and even, like, ask your pastor, who is probably older than you, that has been in this for a really long time, say, like, hey, maybe Monday afternoon, can we go out to lunch and can we just talk about what went really well, what didn't do great? I think I really believe if you can go to your pastor and say that, as a guy who is called into ministry, as a guy who really, a lot of senior pastors I know really love preaching and the art of preaching, to sit down and say, hey, like, teach me, to use a Kentucky expression, learn me, stuff, but have an opportunity just to say, like, hey, I want to do better. And I think, like, that's going to help your relationship between the two of you as well, because I think he's going to sit here and say, hey, this is somebody who cares about this church, who want, like, and he's going to have more confidence. If I'm gone, man, like, so-and-so can really knock this out of the park. We've worked on this. But I said, really just, watch, listen, and have opportunities to practice is kind of the things that I would really recommend. And honestly, you go ahead.
Oh, no, you're fine. I was just going to say, you did say that you do listen to a few pastors and a few podcasts. So, like, throw some out. What do you listen to?
This is not, like, brown nose. I love our pastor, my pastor on Sunday morning. I listen to him a lot. I listen to, I got a buddy in South Carolina at Rocky Creek Baptist named Travis, that I listen to him on the week. Snowbird Wilderness Outfitters is a great podcast. That is a camp that I used to go to when I was in junior high that made a great impact on me, that I'm still, here, 15 years later, that I'm still listening to a lot of their content. Those are something. And I said, like, there's never, if somebody's, like, really properly and effectively teaching the Bible, there's no wrong answer to that. And there's some guys that are great, gifted communicators, that their content is so far in left field that they're basically, in foul ball territory. And there's some guys that are great with their content, but I mean, they're not really the most engaging speakers. And I think there's things that we can learn from both sides. There's things that we can learn about, how they craft, like, their sentences, how they craft their words, how they craft, some of those things, but not neglecting, like, hey, what I say needs to match up.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And I would say, as far as me, I would throw two in there that particularly have had pretty good influence over me over the past couple of years. First off, if you are a book reader and you haven't read it, Communicating for a Change by Andy Stanley is probably one of the best communication books I think I've ever read in my entire life. He presents a method of writing lessons and writing, like structuring your sermons, structuring your lesson style and structure to where like you can be efficient, and you can also continuously draw in the crowd and then challenge and push them to like go forth and really have impact. Great book. And then the other thing that I would say is Tim Mackey. He's the guy that is behind the Bible Project. And so most of y'all by now probably have seen or heard of the Bible Project as far as their YouTube videos and stuff like that, where they have the little animated videos talking about different stories, so like different books of the Bible and themes in the Bible and stuff like that. Well, he has a podcast that is just basically replaying a archive of like 10 years of his sermons. And I find him incredibly captivating as far as a speaker, because he presents information in a very, very intriguing way, at least for me. And so that podcast is Exploring My Strange Bible. And it is so good. Super great podcast. They are long because they're all sermons. So they're probably 45 minutes to an hour long, at least on each. But he presents information from not only a biblical lens, but also a scholarly lens. And he's presented a lot of stuff in ways that I've never considered before, and has challenged me to grow in my own concepts and understandings of how I see things. And so those would be my two, but I will definitely throw his friend Travis from Rocky Creek Baptist. We'll throw a link to that church so you can listen to some of their sermons. And then also the camp that he mentioned earlier, we'll throw that in the show notes down at the bottom as well. And then so lastly, it's been great, Hunter. We've loved this conversation. How can people connect with you on social media? Do you have any shameless plugs for anything you're working on, et cetera? Man, this time is yours. So take it away.
If I'm finally at a church that have like a legit official like church sponsored email address, which is pretty cool. Because I tell students this all the time, man, like the decisions you make when you're 15, 16 years old, like will have lasting consequences as you get older. So, if you do like just football star 47 at hotmail.com, like, make you a new email and be professional. No, I'm just kidding. If you can email me at hunter.smith@mzbc.net. That's the initials for Mount Zion Baptist Church. Would love to email, love to just, hang out and chat. I love hanging out with people that are in the game as well and just bouncing things off. And, sometimes in ministry, we just need some time to vent a little bit and talk about our ministry and, joke on people and things like that. And, that's a great opportunity. I highly encourage, if there's a group of youth ministers in your area, like, man, go out to lunch and hang out. It's a great thing. It's done awesome things for my ministry. So you can email me. You can follow me on Instagram at they call me HDS. That sounded good in college when I discovered Instagram. And here I am. I'm technologically like completely illiterate. So there's probably a way to change that. I don't know what it is, but maybe you'll help me with that. Help me help you anyways. But yeah, that's you can catch me this summer with Central Kid at Shaco Springs, July 4th through the 10th. That's as far as if you're ever in the Huntsville, Alabama area sometime, come by and let's get coffee or a donut or something like that. Let's hang. So
yeah, that's awesome. So definitely. And yes, Instagram, you can change your username. So okay. I'll be sure to, if we have that conversation after this podcast ends, I'll be sure to put his correct Instagram username in the show notes. But yeah, so definitely, Hunter, thank you for being on. Really love the conversation, man. It's great content, great conversation to have, because I think this is something that for most youth pastors is presented at some point. And I mean, it can really be something that if we're not careful, allows us to take a step into the less humble option of presenting ourselves. And so it's really, really good content to keep your guard up, remain humble, remain focused on the students, remain focused on being there to serve others. Good stuff, man. Well, that's it. That's it for this episode of Student Ministry Conversations. We love you guys. Be sure to check out the show notes that are on our website, studentministryconversations.org. And then, as always, we'd love to see you next week, and we'd love to hear from you guys. So if you have any comments or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Please share with us, find us on social media, talk to us. And until next time, we'll see you later.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us and listening to this conversation. Listen, we know you have options of all these wonderful podcasts to listen to, and we're glad you spent a little bit of time with us today. Again, I want to thank Brent and Hunter for this great conversation, and we hope that you found something that you can use as you continue to pour into the lives of your students.
Yeah, if you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, we would ask that you leave a comment and a rating on whatever platform you're listening to us on. We would appreciate that so much. Also, maybe you know someone who would benefit from this conversation. Take a moment, share this with them on social media, tag them, and then tag us at Talk Student Men on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And then also, we've had a few people ask how you can support the podcast. And we have a couple options for that. You can buy our merchandise. It's available on the store, studentministryconversations.com/shop. And then also, if you go to our links in the description, there's also an opportunity to support us financially via monthly support option. And you can put $5 into our podcast a month, or however you see fit. And we would love to have the opportunities and the luxuries of making this podcast better and better as it goes down the road. And that's up to the funds that we have and the time and effort that we put into it. And so you would be doing a great part in helping us get that done, and we'd appreciate it. Now, Russell, you have next week's episode. What do we have in store for the podcast next week?
Yeah, well, next week is Thanksgiving, so we're going to be doing something a little different. But the following week, we're going to have an interview with Tom Crozier. And Tom is a youth pastor in Chicago. He's been with Jesus People Chicago for over 25 years. And we're going to talk about collaboration. What are the ways that you can work with others, whether that's other youth groups, other ministries, other technologies, just ways that we can come together to continue to build the body of Christ and to pour into the lives of students. So I am looking forward to this conversation, and I hope you are as well.
That sounds great. I can't wait to hear the conversation. Just a reminder, be sure to go to studentministryconversations.org for show notes and links from this episode. Just search for this week's episode number in the search bar. We also have other helpful articles and posts on there as well. Again, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week.